How's it going? What we're going to do in this video is we're going to be installing a upgraded fuel rail right here onto this SRT4. It kind of matches it, nice and blue. This has the stock 0405 style rail on it. I do have more fuel upgrades that I'm going to be doing in the future, but I wanted to really install this because I kind of wanted to see how it was going to look. And just make sure that everything was going to fit up. I do have bigger injectors and a fuel system also, which I'm planning to add to this car later. So let's get started on getting this thing installed. All right, guys. With any job that you're going to do where you're opening up something that's an entranceway to the inside of the motor where you do not want debris to go, your prep work is going to be your #1 thing. All right. So, since I have access to some compressed air, I'm going to get in here and make sure I blow out air across the top of this intake and around these fuel injectors in here in case there's any loose dust, dirt, you don't know if there's a stone. Basically, get that stuff prepped up and cleaned out of the way. All right? Now this is fairly clean. It doesn't get driven too much, but it's still an outside car and it does get used. Now, the next thing you want to do, which is really good, I like to use WD-40 and I spray it down in around the O-rings on the end of the injectors. That's going to help aid in removal of the fuel injectors when you get there. And it will keep you from damaging the actual O-rings. All right. Now on top of this, along with your prep work, before you get to this point, you want to come in here. This one right over here on the very far end, that is your fuel relay. Okay. Now, if you have a fuel rail that has a spot where you can bleed the pressure off, you're fine. But typically what you want to do on any time you're pulling a fuel system apart, pull your fuel relay, let the car run. It will remove any pressure that's on there. But I wasn't able to do that because I'm already in here working on some other things. So what I'm going to do is I have a rag here, okay? I'm going to get these two here clipped in so I know it's ready to release, and give it a little pull, okay? So I'm going to hold a rag over this so that I don't get any fuel sprayed on me or in my eyes in case there's any pressure. All right, that actually came off there pretty easy. We didn't have any pressure. It's been a little while since this has been started, so that might explain why. Okay. Now, you're going to need to remove all of this wiring and get it out of the way. Be careful with all of this stuff. Right now, at this point, this is a 16-year-old car, so when you get into touching this stuff, these ends, they're brittle. They can break really easily. All right? So that's another thing you want to do, okay? Just be careful. Use patience. Like this one here. Okay, there we go. All right. Actually, knock that lock off of that one. Now I have this run across here, so this makes this a little tight. But normally, you can get a hold of this fuel line for the engine harness wiring and slide it back like that, okay? So there we go. These factory fuel rail hold downs are 13mm. Let's get them removed. So now that we have our hold downs for the fuel rail removed, this should move around a little bit here, okay? And that, I always like to give the stuff a little bit of a wiggle. Kind of helps the WD-40 work its way down in around. These can be spun back and forth very gently a little bit because they have the clips. They have clips on them that keeps them from moving. So I kind of like to You know, you can wiggle them a little bit, helps loosen everything up. You can use a flathead screwdriver. I'll come in behind here. And if you pull gently, most of the time, these will all come out. I'm sure these, I don't think these fuel injectors or rail has ever been off of this car. So, let that stuff soak a little bit more. What ended up working out pretty good because it was actually flexing. This is just what worked for me. I was able to get in here and work these at the same time so that I was actually pulling out this direction. I just can't pull too hard with my left shoulder. So there we go. We have our fuel rails is now removed. And when you pull this off, this will still have fuel in it, so watch tipping this. Now you can actually get down in here now and you can see what's here. There is still dirt down in here. See if that brings that up for the camera. Use a little bit of paper towel. I mean, you know, you can get picky Q-tips, whatever. Try to keep any of that from running down inside your engine. So right now, I'm going to drain out the fuel rail, and then I'll show you how to get the injectors out of the rail. Alright, just since we now have this, basically what you have is you have these clips. I just kind of like to pull them off like this. They pop right out. Okay. Now also I like to just give these a little dose with some WD-40 and then give them a spin. You know, wiggle them around, try to get it down in there. And they almost just pull right out then. Okay, there we go. Check it out. Alright, so you now have your injectors out. Basically, you can use WD-40, spray these down, wipe them off. What you're going to do also, you know what I mean, since you have them out, is you want to double check all of your O-rings. Make sure there's like no major dry rot, no tears, no anything. If it's not a smooth, good surface for an O-ring, I mean, these ones down here toward the bottom are starting to show their age. But the last thing you want is a fuel leak, especially on something that's a turbo car with high fuel pressure. So we'll get all these cleaned up and then we'll get them ready to be put back in. So I just always like to stick these clips back on here in case you ever need this for something. That way you don't lose these little things. Probably never use one of these again unless you need it for something. Alright, now, so we have our two fuel rails basically sitting side by side. Okay, so here's something that we need to transfer over so that it works. Is this little clip here. I might have to go get a different screwdriver. But basically, we need to push these little plastic clips up right here. Get them to slide over. Okay. So now this one has a little bit of dirt, so I'm just going to wipe it off quick. You can be super picky if you want to. Alright, so now we're just going to slide this down over. And there you go. This will connect right up to our factory fuel line. Now, we have our nice clean injectors. They're ready to be reinserted. Basically, I always put a little bit of grease on here. If there's any in the fuel, any gets inside here, gas just deteriorates it. So we just put a little bit on that end. We'll get this end prepped, ready to go down into the intake. This is the way it goes. So you just slide your injector in like that. We're going to get the rest of these done, and I'll catch you over at the intake, and we'll get that cleaned up and ready to install our fuel rail. So that you can see, I did actually get in these two over here with some Q-tips. This one here, I did not get down in. I don't know if you can see it in the camera or not, but I did get some Q-tips. I had them in, you know, it's a shop necessity. I just always have some out here. I packs of them in case I get something in my eyeball. Look, you can see the amount of stuff that's caught right down in here on this little ledge. So basically all I'm doing is using an out wiping motion, which is another good reason, you know, these were sprayed with WD-40, so it kind of, you know, it made any of the dust or anything, dirt, debris, all clumped together down in there. So I just wanted to show this off. I'm going to actually spray some Q-tips with some WD-40 and just wipe them down in there a little bit, maybe use it as a cleaner. Maybe even spray some in there, but I don't want to force anything down in. The whole idea is anything that's hard, you don't want to go down in there. There is some sandy stuff. It'll pass through a motor, but it could score something. You know, it all depends, you know. Something could happen, something might. It might just go down in there and shoot right out the exhaust. So, everything cleaned up. It's pretty much prepped. We got grease on our O-rings, so we don't need our WD-40. I'm going to throw this out. And with that said, we're back to our using some of this anti-seize. I like to put a little bit in here, you know. Probably could wipe that off after I get that down in there, but I like to try to get some forced down into these threads because you don't want anything to go on them. I've seen plenty of them stripped out. So we're ready to install our fuel rail with our injectors in right now. Okay, so here's our fuel rail ready to go. They give you these two Allen head bolts with these washers. Like right now, these are just stock injectors. I don't need any spacers here. Sometimes you can run longer ones with spacers, and then you would need a longer piece, or maybe even throw the washer on the bottom. Just depends on what injectors you're running. Slide these down in here, line up my holes. Just push on it just a little bit. Play with them some. Get both sides started up. Going down in. Alright, I'm going to grab an extension. Alright, just tighten down. You don't need the hold down clips because this fuel rail will actually hold them in place. Now, okay, so now we're going to plug in all of our wiring, our injectors. See if this will still fit. All right. Okay, now that that's down in there, with these fuel rails, they have O-rings in here. I like to douse them with a little bit of WD-40. That way when you're sliding it down on here, you're not damaging the fuel rail. So there we go. Doesn't that look a whole lot nicer? Now the reasons behind something like this is, if you looked at this the way it is here, those are actually vents to help cool the fuel. And another reason why you want to run something like this is, I can tap off of here now for my return line. I can actually run a sensor off of here, or I can run a gauge right on top of this. And also, it holds more fuel right here at the injectors, so that when they open up and they need more fuel, they're not draining the line out. So we're ready for some upgrades for our fuel system when the rest of our engine requires it.